Good morning. Welcome to MeynellTV episode 5, where I hope to bring a little bit of joy, thinking and knowledge into your lives. This week, the news has been dominated by the brutal murder of George Floyd and the subsequent responses by the public on the streets of America. Racism is not something that is just confined to the United States. It is endemic and systemic throughout the whole of white culture. I am the product of a society and a system where white privilege has gone unrecognized, unnoticed, and unresponded to for so long. What can I do to make the situation, both in my personal and social and inner sphere, and politically in local and national government, what can I do to make things better? But saying all this is well and good, but what we need to think about is how this impacts on, affects children's play, not just in America but in the UK and around the world. If a fear of being singled out because of the colour of your skin leaves you apprehensive, leaves you worried, leaves you feeling unsafe, then your opportunities to play become diminished. We know from the research about play that play happens when children feel safe. And there was an incredible story on the news not so long ago about a group of refugees fleeing from an untenable situation. And on the first day, it was one long straggle of scared and fearful people. On the second day, they were queuing at a border, adults and children waiting to cross. On the third day, the adults were still queuing, but the children were now playing in the fields at the side of the road. Because the imminent danger had passed, the child felt safe. The children were able to play. We have to try to create spaces where children feel safe coming to and fro and safe when they play. Sarah, welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to be my guest on this week's MeynellTV. Now, our viewers need to know that you and I have known each other for a long time, and not only are you one of my esteemed colleagues, but you're also one of my close friends. Yes. You left Eastbourne, Hailsham, where you used to live, and travelled up to Scotland to do your PhD and locked yourself away in Glasgow. But during the pandemic, the rules in Scotland are different than the rules in England. So how has this whole horrible process been affecting you?
Well, we've had a longer time in lockdown than you have down in England.
Right.
So I think it was last week we were allowed to go and see people in the park. We're allowed to go and sunbathe now.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! In Glasgow, there's always loads of sun. And yeah, so it's a lot tougher, I think, up here. So we've been inside a lot more. But that's not been too bad for me. But it's tough not being able to see friends, but we're always on Zoom and having chats and doing quizzes and things like that.
Has it impacted on the way you've been writing up your PhD?
Yeah, I've been able to have more time focusing on it. So I'm also working part-time. So the days I'm working, I'm doing that. But the days I'm not, I'm able to kind of focus a bit more on doing my PhD, and I'm not getting distracted by going to see my friends next door or in uni, and having a chat about stuff. So it's been a silver lining for me. I might actually get this thing done.
Yay! That's exciting. No, I really do want to talk to you about your PhD because you are kind of treading a path, treading on ground that's not very much explored or really understood by most people in the play and playwork world. So, would you just briefly tell us what it is you've been looking at?
Yeah, so my PhD is entitled Girls' Toys and Boys' Toys Learning Through Play. And it's something that I hadn't really thought about before doing the PhD. So I've learned loads about gender, and how that interacts with play. But it's also intersectional, so it's not just about gender. We're also looking, gender is also goes hand in hand with race, with ability, disability. So it's not just looking about gender. We have to look at those things all together. And so I wanted to ask children what they thought about toys and gender, because a lot of the literature is looking at what adults think that toys mean to children. And it's quite often about difference. So we don't see similarities between boys and girls, it's all about difference. And we don't see the differences within genders. So the differences within girls or the differences within boys. And they're much more prevalent than there are differences between girls and boys. So yeah, I wanted to see what children thought about it. So I went to two after school clubs in Glasgow, did some observations, children playing, and also did focus groups and interviews with children to find out what they thought. And I'm just in the process of writing it all up.
Is there anything that you've discovered you're at liberty to tell us about?
Well, I can't tell you my major findings because that's going to be waiting till the thesis is written. But I think we as play workers, and I think we do this, we need to be aware of toys that are a bit more gender neutral, or about how we are setting up the environment. So thinking about not making things exclusive, mixing things up, putting boys' toys and girls' toys together so you have that mix. And encouraging and supporting children if they want to cross gender boundaries, or if they are just thinking in different ways and playing in different ways.
You say the play worker should be supporting children if they want to cross gender boundaries and play with gender boundaries. What do you mean by that?
So it's really hard for children, especially young children, to cross gender boundaries or to challenge gender boundaries on their own, because gender, along with lots of other things, is really ingrained in our culture, in our way of thinking. So it's really hard for somebody, even adults, but children find it even harder to do something against the norm, especially within their peer groups, because it's such a strong thing. So we need to support children if they're looking to play in a different way. We need to be able to support them to play in that way. And that might be thinking about the play cycle and thinking about cues and things that are coming out, and maybe preventing others from saying something to them, from stopping the others from that kind of play. So it's about being aware of, I think, of other people and encouraging children to be themselves, and to have that confidence to forge their own path, and being supportive of that. So we're not stopping it, and we're not standing back, because a lot of free play has been criticised for being sexist, maybe, because children are just playing in the way they want to, which tends to be very gender specific because that's the way we play. So we need to create environments which enable children to play with boys' toys if they're girls, or girls' toys if they're boys. So we're creating that open and supportive environment. And loose parts are really important in this because they are gender neutral. You know, they don't say, they're not like a doll or a car which says this is what boys or girls should play with. So loose parts are much more gender neutral and more supportive of children to play the way they want to.
That was brilliant. That gives lessons to play workers and other adults who are working in children's contexts. Keep the rest of the world away so the child can play, and make sure the child realize they have all the overt, subconscious, unconscious permissions to play in the way they want to play. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us today. The lessons you have taught us will, I'm sure, be welcomed by everyone.
You're welcome.
And now, come with me as we go across to the big chair for this week's Playwork story. And this week's story, Bloody Edgar, was written by Claire Cooper when she was working in Wokingham. It happened one evening where, in the soft play room, we had about 8 children playing. The children were energetic and having fun. They were happy and playing, building with the soft play blocks and making towers, and also attempting to build houses. In this space we also have a little slide that goes down into the soft play. I was working alongside a colleague when one of the children, Edgar, went on the slide, but he lost his footing on the steps whilst going up the stairs and fell backwards. Around the room we have a wooden skirting board, and Edward fell backwards off the slide, hitting the back of his head on the skirting board. Edward is one of those children that doesn't cry out when he has hurt himself, or another child has hurt him. So when he cried out, I knew that's not like him, and he must be hurt. Edgar was crying, so I went over to him and gave him a hug, and as I put my hand on the back of his head, I felt something wet. I pulled my hand away and saw that I had blood all over my hand, and it was running down his neck and all in his hair. I called to the other staff that were in the room to ring the manager and the deputy to come and help me and tell them that Edgar had hurt his head badly. The other children hadn't noticed yet what had happened, and when my fellow play worker came back in, they said the manager was on the way. I told the other play worker I'm going to take him out of here, as it's getting stuffy and Edward needs fresh air, and I'll send someone in to cover me. So I took Edgar out and told the other member of staff to go in there and cover me, and I took Edgar to a calmer place. The staff were very helpful and dealt with the accident very well. I have never had an accident like this in all the time I have been working with children. I rushed Edgar to the first aid room. I asked him to put his hand on his head where he banged it, so I could wash mine and get a sterile gauze out to clean it up more. The manager and the deputy arrived to help me, and the manager said, "We'll take over from here, Claire. You can go and take a breather, and can you also ring his parents, tell them what happened, so they can get here and take him to the A&E. I told Edward I was going to get a drink and phone his mummy and daddy and tell them what had happened, and I'll be coming back soon. I stepped out and got some water and a breather and got hold of Edgar's father, told him what had happened and that Edgar needs to go to A&E, get it stitched up. His father replied very calmly and said he is on the way. I went back to the first aid room and asked Edgar how he was feeling, and Edgar replied and said, "I'm okay." I told the manager I got hold of Dad and said he was on the way. Edgar then had calmed down and back to his normal self, asking questions, and then asked me if his daddy is coming. And then I replied and said, yes, he'll be here soon. Phew. Working with children, we're always going to get accidents and injuries. You know, Pat Petrie once said, show me a setting that has no accidents and I'll show you somewhere that is not a play setting. So we have to be ready for it. But you can feel the tension in Claire as she's had to deal with something like this. A child crying, a child with blood, it's traumatic. And we have to be able to look after ourselves as well as looking after the children. And Claire did that. She followed all the right protocols. She told colleagues what was going on. She got support from senior staff. And when she could, she took that breath to be able to relax, have a drink, and move on. When looking after children, we have to be ready for these horrible, bloody moments. And then we have to also look after ourselves. Thank you for watching this week's episode of MeynellTV. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I did making it. Massive gratitude to Sarah Goldsmith for being my guest this week. I love what she has to say. Can't wait to see the outcome of her research. Use the hashtag MeynellTV across all our social media. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment in the box below. Thank you. Stay safe. Bye. Oh, I do like to be beside